What fresh hell is this? Hi, my name is Sydney, welcome back to hell. Now at this stage, it's probably clear to most of you that I have an interest in the protection of pudding people, the explosion of gender theory, and I guess the overall faddiness, the fad that has been created out of transgenderism. And this being said, I know a bunch of you have completely hit your saturation point with it, and honestly, I don't blame you, but the whole thing is like one gender-confused hydra. One head gets lopped off and two more grow back in its place. And by head, I mean penis. And by head, I mean... I mean head. Now, back in April, I came across an article called The New Homophobia, and it basically argued that the LGBTQIA activism and community is trying to erase sex and sexuality and push for the long-term medicalization of people when it isn't necessary. Around the same time, I came into contact with a series of screenshots about a young transgender child here in Texas. The mother of this child said that she thought her son might be gay, and she wasn't going to let that happen. Soon the child was accepted as transgender and is now, I guess, like a trans kid activist. Because we really need them. And honestly, the whole thing got me thinking. The more that I looked into it, the more I came to realize that this wasn't an isolated incident. And in fact, I came into contact with the idea that even among people in the LGBTQIA community, in some ways it's more preferable to be trans over gay. But I hadn't stopped to consider who and what might be contributing to that and to what extent. Mostly because I don't want to watch any more TikToks. They give me depression. Although it's been quiet and it's more like rumblings rather than a discussion, in recent years the conversation surrounding the trans industrial complex and the effect it's having on gay people has started to gain momentum. At least on the right wing, acknowledging that parents and teachers are having an impact in pushing kids down this path is becoming more and more commonplace. And because I find this sort of thing extremely interesting and disturbing, I thought it would be worth looking into. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Transing away the gay, how it happens here in the West, in other countries you never would expect, and generally what it looks like overall. Sadness. In 2018, a mother and her child participated in a documentary about trans children. During the interview, the mother said that at 3, she thought her son might be gay, and she couldn't let that happen.
I remember even thinking before Kai was 3 that I think this kid might be gay. And I thought that could not happen, and that would not happen. We started praying fervently. Prayers turned into Googling conversion therapy and how can we implement these techniques at home to make Kai not be like this. Putting her in timeout for acting like a girl, putting her in timeout for stealing girl toys, spanking her, really spanking her every time she would say, "You know I'm a girl."
This is already feeling really healthy. The mother also noted that she was concerned because she was running a small ministry at her church and teaching Bible study. People asked her if her son was gay repeatedly, while the family tried to encourage the son towards more masculine things like fishing, hunting, and sports, and punishing him when he did feminine things and taking away his girly toys. Ultimately, they came to accept that he was transgender. Kai is now 11, and at the beginning of 2020 was considered for Time's Kid of the Year. Since this story has been evolving, some of the commentary surrounding it has been like, yeah, your conversion therapy worked. Just not in the way that you thought. Don't you just hate it when you beat the gay out of your kids so much they become a girl? The assumption here being that if your child can only like girly things if they're a girl, and if the explanation for them liking those girly things is because they're a girl, then why would you be shocked if they suddenly say, they're a girl? Like we've discussed numerous times on this channel, the forcing of inappropriate gender conversations with children is escalating. I have to assume that by now all of you have seen the psycho TikToks of parents forcing weird conversations on their children, using their kids for woke points, and so on.
White people that aren't like serial killers like Ted Bundy.
Does your mom say you have to be LGBT? No, I can choose what I want to be, but
Go ahead, Lex. Go ahead. Keep talking. Say what you were saying.
My mom doesn't matter if if I am gay or lesbian or any of that. She doesn't care. All she cares about is that I'm a part of it. And if I'm not a part of it, she'll try to convince me to join it. Cause
What are you saying right now?
Facts.
That I would convince you to join what?
The LGBTQIA plus community.
This one always makes me laugh. I love how the mum's just like, wait a second. Stop saying the quiet bit out loud. We've also all seen the videos about parents raising their kids as babies. Don't even act like you haven't. But what we're going to talk about here is adjacent to that. And I'm not saying that there's not some correlation probably between parents also saying that their child cannot like girly or boyish things, even if they're straight, and then that child transitioning to meet the requirements of the gender expectations forced upon them. I definitely think that happens probably in some capacity. But here we're looking at taking a probably gay child who would more than likely grow up into a healthy, happy homosexual. They're being forced instead to be a straight trans person. It's confusing, I know. Maybe I'll make you a flowchart. The overarching explanation is that for some people, for some parents, teachers, etc., it's easier to accept a transgender straight daughter than an effeminate gay son. And vice versa, because there's lesbians as well. And in researching this topic, I found that this concept isn't all that far-fetched. Plenty of people look to Iran, of all places, to demonstrate what this looks like when taken to the nth degree. Because there's nothing that the Iranian regime loves more than transgender people. Iran is second only to Thailand in the number of transgender surgeries performed. Although homosexuality is still very illegal, transsexuality has been legal since 1987, and gender reassignment surgeries, as far as I understand, are more or less free or mostly subsidized, given that about a decade ago the Iranian regime announced that health insurance companies must cover the cost of these operations. Now, this all sounds great if you're someone seeking gender reassignment surgery. It attracts a lot of Westerners every year. I can't even adequately explain the irony of this one. It's just, it's too much. However, it has been reported that Iran forces gay people to have gender reassignment surgery or face execution. Peter Tatchell, why always with these bloody names? A British human rights campaigner said in an interview that Iran's policy has nothing to do with supporting trans people. You don't say. It is motivated by a desire to eradicate homosexuality and enforce traditional male and female gender norms. In a BBC report from 2012, 45% of people having gender reassignment surgery in Iran were gay. In case you didn't get it, LGBTQIA warriors, I assume, go to a country for an elective surgery, but the only reason that that surgery is popular because the Iranian people don't get a choice, which means that most of their activism is so performative. In 2008, an Iranian-born filmmaker made a documentary about this issue in the country. In one scene, a Muslim cleric explains how this is allowed. He says that an action is allowed unless it states specifically in the Quran that that act is a sin. Why is adultery one of the 7 deadly sins? Because it specifically says so in the Quran, but it does not specifically state that sex change is a sin. Therefore, we cannot call it a sin. So just to be clear, being same-sex attracted is a sin, having relations with the same sex is a sin, but changing your sex is not. So if you change your sex and then start having relations with the now opposite gender, you're in the clear. We really need a flowchart. I have to imagine that there is a portion of LGBTQIA activists who would argue that the things happening in Iran are oppressive and cruel, especially when you give somebody this kind of ultimatum. Although it seems plenty of Westerners, like I mentioned, have absolutely no problem taking advantage of it. What I find troubling here in the West is that young people are being pushed towards transgenderism in the same way, although they don't have the threat of decapitation on the table. They're being pushed towards this because they're not being properly assessed by the gender clinics and employees who are supposed to be helping them. In 2018, 2019, and 2021, Tavistock, a mental health trust that provides health services in England, found itself on the receiving end of controversy after several people blew the whistle on gay youth potentially being directed towards transition rather than their same-sex attraction being properly explored.
And there'd been a great pressure to affirm these children as being trans, for example, when they present, without appropriate exploration. 35% of these children are on the autistic spectrum. A large number of these children, and this has also been acknowledged by the LGB Alliance, a large number of these children are gay and lesbian children who are suffering in relation to their sexual orientation and need to be helped to understand themselves better. So that is, they have what we call an internalized homophobia. They hate themselves, they hate their sexual body, and they want to get out of it. What is really, really important in these instances is to recognize the terrible suffering of these children and not to precipitately label them as trans and put them on a medical pathway which has irreversible consequences. Now, the reason I say all that is because there's been a tendency to interpret the Memorandum of Understanding, which is the professional framework, as implying that children and young people who present with gender identity issues should be immediately affirmed. And this that's caused damage.
In 2019, an article was published explaining that multiple former NHS employees felt that gay kids were being improperly assessed prior to transition. The clinicians have warned that complex histories and adolescent confusion over possible homosexuality are being ignored in the rush to accept and celebrate every young person's new transgender identity. Clinicians noted that it feels like conversion therapy for gay children, noting a range of situations. For example, some kids start identifying as trans after months of bullying for being gay. Lesbians who were unpopular suddenly became popular when they said they were trans. Young people were transitioning so their gender would match their sexuality, so they could be quote-unquote heterosexual. We had so many families who would talk about not wanting their daughters to be lesbian. For some families, it was easier to say, "This is a medical problem, here's my child, please fix them," than dealing with a young gay kid. So many potentially gay children were being sent down the pathway to change gender. Two of the clinicians said there was a dark joke among staff that there would be no gay people left. Yeah, they'll all be giving birth from their surgically constructed penises before you know it. Don't you love societal progress? An interesting little caveat here is that although we don't have a tremendous amount of literature from which to draw, and that which already exists contradicts itself and each other a lot of the time, there is data that says that the most likely outcome of kids who suffered from gender dysphoria as kids is homosexuality and bisexuality. In a study of pre-pubertal male and female children with gender dysphoria who were followed up with 10 years later, 27% were still dysphoric. Of the individuals no longer expressing gender dysphoria, all female and half of the male participants expressed a non-heterosexual sexual orientation. So there's that. Now, obviously there are a ton of different reasons for these outcomes. I'm not saying that this is a one-size-fits-all type situation, and I can't understate the importance of looking at the psycho blue-haired weirdos teaching your children in schools. They cannot be overlooked.
My kids from last year are now in 5th grade and they come visit me almost every day after school. And a lot of them are queer because I am queer. And they figured it out. And so I've become their safe space.
We do not fully understand what causes Alzheimer's disease.
So today was full of little happy gender euphoria moments. I got called Mr. Micah a lot today. Well, completely femme. And that was really heartwarming that the kids just got it.
Besides Tavistock's clinicians commenting on what gender clinics are doing to kids, pushing them down this pipeline, oftentimes without rhyme or reason, there are plenty of anecdotal stories from online transgender communities where, particularly Reddit, people describe their relief after finding they were trans after being rejected and tormented for being gay. Now, in most of these cases, it appears that these people truly believe they are transgender, and they very well might be. I don't know. However, it's certainly worth noting that many share the same stories of having been subjected to parents or peers who are either outraged at the idea of their loved one being gay prior to them identifying as trans, or who almost celebrated the novelty of their loved one identifying as trans. So circling back.
Circle back, circle back, circle back, circle back. We will circle back, circle back, circle back, circle back, certainly circle back.
Circling back around to the mother that we discussed at the beginning of this video, I found a similar story, one that very much reflects what we already discussed. Susie Green, the CEO of Mermaids, a UK-based transgender charity, I suppose, that focuses on transgender youth, also thought that her son was gay for similar reasons in the first story, because her son liked playing with girls' toys. When her child was about 2, she came to the conclusion that she had a very sensitive, quite effeminate little boy who was probably gay. In a TED Talk, Green said her husband didn't approve of the son's effeminate behavior and would punish him. She adds that the couple decided to take away all their son's girly toys. He was made aware that they were not appropriate, and suddenly he became very sad and withdrawn. A short time later, Green notes that her child kept reiterating, I'm a girl, I'm really a girl. She went to the doctor about the issue, then called Mermaids, and by the age of 7, her child was going to the Tavistock Gender Clinic, because obviously we know how well that turns out. By 2009, Green took her 16-year-old child to Thailand for gender reassignment surgery, because it was illegal in the UK. Like I said, this story is very similar to that of Kai Shipley, the Texan child that we discussed at the beginning of this video. Both little boys liked girly things. Both parents thought their kids were gay, and then started associating those girly things with girls, and then suddenly their children are identifying as such. And honestly, full disclosure, this is just speculation. This is just me listening to what they have to say and putting the puzzle pieces together. Perhaps these are children who really do suffer from gender dysphoria, who are legitimately transgender. Maybe that's actually the case. Or maybe it's not, and maybe this is conditioning. And maybe it's that parents have an easier time accepting their child as transgender rather than same-sex attracted. I can't make the determination of what's true and what's not. I can only put the idea on the table. Ultimately, it's interesting that transgender and LGBTQIACY activists like to say that the binary doesn't mean anything, that gender stereotypes are silly and outdated and useless, and that gender expression is free and fluid. But when you look at all of these kids who do not fit the stereotypical mold, they now have to assume a new identity. They have to be the opposite sex in order for their interests to make sense. It's said on all sides of this conversation that when you have a little boy who likes dolls and a little girl who likes trucks, it is assumed that they must belong to the opposite gender category rather than just being a child who happens to like the things that they like that might not be stereotypical for their gender. If this video tells you anything, it's that gender clinics and Iran have a lot to answer for. And the parents who are being led astray by these clinics are being done an enormous disservice. And sadly, in the end, the kids are the ones stuck in the middle, being let down on all sides. Now I open the floor to all of you. What do you all think? Do you believe that these gender clinics have to answer for pushing kids towards medicalization rather than exploring if they are same-sex attracted? Do you think that parents have a part to play in all of this, that even if they're trying to do the right thing by their kids, they might inadvertently also be pushing them down a very strange road, whether that be on the woke side of things or the more right-wing side of things? Do you believe that this is an issue at all? What do you make of what Iran is doing and how it's trying to eradicate homosexuality by making everyone who's gay trans? And what do you generally make of this issue overall? As always, if you like the video, hit subscribe and the thumbs up button. If you want to leave a comment, feel free to do so. Just be respectful about it. And I will see you guys next time.